Hi, I'm Susie Ivany and I'm Vice President of Australia of ICJW. And it gives me great pleasure today to be introducing this panel, which is very close to my heart. Women in Modern Orthodoxy, pushing against the constraints. It also gives me great pleasure to introduce the chair of the panel, who is Hinda, who the members of the Sydney community know her very well. Hinda graduated from McGill University in Montreal with a major in classics and a minor in Judaic studies. She taught ancient languages and Jewish studies to children of all ages in New York City and Chicago, before moving to Sydney in September 2015. In Sydney, she has taught for the New South Wales Board of Jewish Education and co-chaired Limud 2017. She directs the Sydney Melton School of Adult Jewish Education and is passionate about providing adults with sophisticated and transformative Jewish education. She and her husband, Rabbi Ben Elton, live in the CBD, where her husband is the Chief Minister of the Great Synagogue. I welcome Hinda.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the ICJW for the invitation to take part and moderate this very important panel. I attended last night's opening dinner, and I was so impressed with the work of the Council, all the various activities that this Council does all around the world. I commend Robin Len for her work over the past few years, not least organizing this fantastic convention. I welcome the delegates from all over the world to this wonderful city, which I've been very lucky to make my home. So to start, I'm in a peculiar position. I regard myself as a modern woman. I would not argue with the description of feminist, and yet I have found myself in the most traditional female role in the Jewish community. I'm a rebbitzin. It was not a role I sought. It came because I married a man who very shortly after our marriage became the rabbi of the Great Synagogue, where you will visit on Wednesday. Very good tour with Michael Gold. I highly recommend. This involves me offering pastoral support to congregants, especially women, teaching, and religious guidance, which I find tremendously meaningful, but for which I have not been specifically trained. I'm lucky in that I had a rich Jewish education at my Jewish day school to the age of 18, identical to the boys in my school, which gave me familiarity with Jewish texts, including Talmud and Jewish law, and I was brought up in an Orthodox household where I learned how to live a traditional Jewish life by example. So I stand at the cusp between modern and traditional Jewish womanhood. Although I have my own educational base, I have greater access to Jewish knowledge because I can turn to my husband, who has a full rabbinic education, and I have the privilege of my position and the voice given to me as the rebbitzin of a synagogue. I look with admiration, though, at the women who themselves have undertaken a full Jewish education and who have taken leadership roles in ensuring that women can find meaningful ritual opportunities. Our three panelists represent 3 generations of Orthodox Jewish women in Sydney. They each present something of a paradox, because while they seek to increase the role of women in Judaism, they have chosen a denomination which inevitably restricts women, certainly in ritual roles. Some have placed more emphasis in their work on prayer, while others look more to expanding the Torah education of older and younger women. While considerable strides have been made in the acceptance of equal education for boys and girls, as I enjoyed in the US, women's ritual roles and leadership roles remain controversial. Gail, Judith, and Talya are probably the most important and insightful women to reflect on these issues, and I'm delighted to have Gail speak first. There were no Jewish day schools when Gail needed one in Melbourne. Her Jewish education came from home and from 2 tedious weekly hours of Sunday school. From that, she recalls almost nothing. Girls were considered religious amongst her cohort if they could read Hebrew, observed something of Shabbat, and took off school for the festivals. Although she never felt constrained, her epiphany came when she was called to the Torah for an aliyah in 1956 in an Orthodox shul where the rabbi was regarded as being somewhat right of the Vilna Gaon in his adherence to halakha. In 1987, the first Australian women's tefillah service was held in the Hammer Lounge Room. 18 women celebrated Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan. It was conducted by Gail's daughter Viva, who had been in New York and had been inspired at women's tefillah services there. Yitz and Blue Greenberg came to Australia in the 1990s and opened the eyes of many to opportunities never before considered by the Orthodox. In 1998, Gail represented Australia in New York at the first international conference of JOFA, the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance. Over 1,000 men and women conferred for a whole weekend. It was life-changing, a peak experience. We have come light years in the 20 earthly years since then. Gail will speak of her early experiences, her journey, and the battle still to be fought right here for acceptance of what women can do if they are able and are educated and inspired to fulfill.
The 1956 war in Suez broke out in October, Parashat Chaya Sarah. I was a student at Melbourne University. My father was the president of Turak Shul in Melbourne. The shul sits on a swamp, and in October, the building was refrigerator cold. The rabbi at the time had the halakhic default position on no in halakhic questions. Unsurprisingly, he wasn't often asked. So you can imagine our surprise when he phoned my father on the Thursday and said of his intention to call women to the Torah on Shabbat. 1956, this is before the feminist movement. After Shacharis rather, he announced from the pulpit, "Our sages have said," he began, and we always smiled because my maiden name was Sage. "Our sages have said that in times of crisis in Israel, women may be called to the Torah in order to donate funds to support the cause. If there are any women who would like to be called, please come downstairs now." There were exactly 5 women in shul. The temperature of about 10 degrees would probably have deterred many. Mrs. Violet Moritz was the wife of the treasurer, and Mrs. Estelle Ball was the wife of the committee man. I don't recall the other 2. 3 of us trooped down the stairs into a designated area cleared of men, of which in a shul that holds about 600 men, there were, I would say, 30. After the Kohen, the Levi, and the Israel had received aliyahs, a nervous Mrs. Moritz said to me, "You go first, Gail, you're the youngest." I didn't quite get the logic, but I gave the shamas my name, and I was duly called up. And in that shul, it really was an aliyah. The cold marble steps are unusually steep. And as I waited next to the gabe, I could smell the mustiness of the velvet parahot, the Torah coverings that sat above the swamp all week in the closed Aron Kodesh. I stood next to the reader as the gabe recited the blessings. I was given a talit corner and shown where to touch the next word. Then the reading began for me. This has been a peak experience of my life ever since. To be up close and personal with a Sefer Torah that is opened on my account, the letters danced. I was transported to another place. At the end, I touched the Torah again, the gabe said the blessings, I told the amount I was donating, and I was congratulated and offered strength. And then I went to my father, who was sitting in the front, and shook his hand. We both giggled. I descended the marble steps and then back to my seat. My world had changed. I had been a weekly shul girl since I was 3. So never had the chance really to question the protocols. I wonder now if this ultra-Orthodox reactionary rabbi could have imagined what a Pandora's box he opened on that day. I knew then that there was very little, halakhically, that knowledgeable women in the support of men in service, in ritual, there is very little that women cannot do who want to and who know what they're doing. In 1988, our daughter Viva had work experience in New York and went to the women's tefillah group services. After returning, she conducted a shacharit service in our lounge room on Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan, November 1989, in the presence of 18 women in our warm, familiar lounge room, where the coffee and cake aromas from the Kiddush wafted in. For probably the first time in Australia, and I can't find alternative record, but that's another story because these things are not recorded, a Sefer Torah was used by Orthodox women in a service. The ceiling had cracked. Then the Greenbergs came in the 1990s, Blue and Yitz, and really changed community attitudes and taught people a great deal of what we can do. Attitudes started to change. Then in 1998, I represented Australia at the first international conference of the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance in New York. Over 1,000 men and women came to a 3-day event in the Cavernous Grand Central Hotel. It was life-changing. We are participants in a bloodless revolution, I told the gathering of the Sunday luncheon. It's an enormous privilege and a responsibility. In 2000, I persuaded Judy Levitan and Shelley Einfeld and their respective husbands to join me at the Jofa conference. This revolution is equally about men who need to be part of the experience. It changed their lives as it did mine. For over 20 years, we have been witness to the increase of women's learning here. The Women's Tefillah Group has conducted dozens of B'not Mitzvah services in response to girls' desire for a serious Jewish learning experience. We've had 19 meticulously rehearsed women's-only Megillah readings, Simchat Torah celebrations, and shiurim. Today, the internet has opened the way for previously unimaginable learning opportunity. Even there are women's Talmud groups meet on the net. A full Jewish education includes the Talmud. If boys begin at age 6, how can women catch up with that when they begin in their teens? An extraordinary cohort of women, mostly in Israel, have not only become highly qualified secularly, but also in Talmud. Some are doctors of philosophy in branches of medicine, law, and education. Then they undertake a further 6 years for Talmud. Today, they are respected advisors to Israeli and American Bedins, especially on matters regarding women. They are consulted in cases of abuse, violence, divorce, and childcare, where the voice of the woman has been effectively ignored. And furthermore, they are now undertaking rabbinic courses for them to have a similar respect, if not a similar activities to rabbis. The key to all, it seems to me, is universal education. Educated women transmit the love of knowledge to their children from birth. And yet, think about the ignorance and conservatism in your own community. The rabbi in a shul where I have davened asked me not to say Kaddish for my father. He told me neither my mother nor my grandmother ever did it. And he thinks that's a reason. My voice was still silenced when there was no halachic basis to do so. The work of educating a society is overwhelming. Nevertheless, it's not a task that we may avoid. As for my 1956 rabbi, who usually said no. I wonder if he's turning in his grave.
Wow, that gave me chills. And that leaves us with so much to reflect on. And I think Judy is really the perfect person to follow up with how this is shared, this passion is shared with the next generation. Judy comes from a Litvak heritage in Johannesburg. Judy and her sister Gila were educated at Masada College. Her father's strong Jewish background, including an ability to argue on the street with the evangelical Adventists who knock at the door. While acceptance of the status quo was never a reason to do something, Judy felt comfortable with the role of women in the Judaism she saw being practiced. There seemed no reason to change. It was Gail who persuaded her to come to the 2000 New York Jofa conference. It was made a condition that her husband Tommy also comes. As we heard from Gail, she believed that these matters are as important to the men as to the women, and she warned that it would be life-changing. It was. Judy saw that these men and women were all devout, highly educated in both the Jewish and secular world. She acknowledged there was much new to inspire and to learn from. And so, she is taking leading roles in supporting Sydney women's participation in individual Benot Mitzvah ceremonies that have real religious significance appropriate to the individual girl. She has learned to lane and to teach laning, to involve otherwise uninvolved women in women-only Megillah readings and Simchat Torah celebrations of their own. She is on the board of Mount Sinai College, encouraging the principles of women's acceptance and participation to be made available in all the places where the glass ceiling can be broken. She herself is pursuing her Jewish education to levels she would never have even known of 18 years ago. She will tell us about her journey and her vision.
Thank you, Kimra, and thank you, Gail. I know when we were talking about how we would structure this, I thought it was just such a beautiful chain to hear Gail's story and her connection, because she really pulled me in, I guess, because as Hinda said, I grew up, and I guess in an Orthodox home, traditional home, but I always felt, and we were two girls, two sisters, I never felt, and I was always educated that, you know, as a woman, you can be whatever you want to be, you can do whatever you want to do. And I remember, like on Saturday afternoons, I would go with my dad to the, Shabbos afternoon rabbi's Talmud shiur. I would go. I never felt excluded or alienated in any way. And then I went to university and I studied social work, and I guess that sort of started my feminist consciousness being raised. And I was then always sort of in this sort of dynamic that sort of went from being a committed Orthodox woman to sort of having these having these feminist feelings, if you like. And I couldn't really name it, I guess, but as I progressed in my university studies, I guess that I was able to sort of frame it that way. And as part of my social work degree, I guess what I was interested also in was violence against women. And so I found a way of sort of marrying the two of those things in looking at domestic violence in the Orthodox Jewish community. And so that was the basis of my social work thesis. And I remember writing in the thesis about that struggle between being sort of secularly educated and living in the secular world, and then always having, and in the secular world, God doesn't exist by definition, it's secular, and then also living and strutting between that and an Orthodox world where God infuses and influences every, movement that you make. And as a result of that thesis, I went to present at Jaffa at the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance Conference in New York, and that was, Gail pulled me into that. And I remember going there and thinking to myself, that's all very nice, but, not for like a good Jewish girl like me. And I don't know, something in me was awoken there, I guess, and I came back and I saw that there were sort of this, well, from being there, I guess, that there was this whole world of people who sort of were also struggling with similar issues to me, that balancing between being a feminist and living in an Orthodox world. And I remember going down to Melbourne to sort of learn about how to run a women's Simchat Torah service and then bring it back and run it in Sydney. And I remember very distinctly that I think until that point, there was sort of dancing with the Torah. We were dancing with the Torah. And people sort of who came to the service and were dancing, who never actually touched the Torah or danced with the Torah, and they sort of sat on the outside of the circle. And I compared this to, when you're at a wedding and you've got the bride who's in the centre of the room, and everybody wants to dance with the bride, or you've got the family, the close family dancing with the bride. And if you're not so close, so you stand in that outer circle because you want to let other people go forward, go first. And it was at that point that I kind of went, okay, the Torah is like a bride, but guess what? It's my close relative and I'm getting in there to dance. And bringing other women into that inner circle to dance, I think was very affirming, because that's it. The Torah is there for us all. So that was definitely a seminal moment. And I guess the other link between the Jaffa conference that I went to in 2000 and then in 2017, I went back to New York to a Jaffa conference just because we actually were on holiday and it happened to coincide at the same time. And that was also very life-changing. Because at that conference they were celebrating, Gail mentioned Blue Greenberg, so they were celebrating her 80th birthday. And Blue Greenberg wrote this book on women in Judaism. And in the book, and I remember I must have been, 13 or 14 when I read it, she talked about, where there's a rabbinic will, there's a halakhic way, and that, and this idea that once you start giving women education, it's going to ultimately lead to them assuming leadership positions and possibly becoming rabbis. And but I think she wrote in the book, but not necessarily in my lifetime. It will take a while. And at this conference, she spoke, and then after she'd spoken, Rabbi Lila Kachedin, who is one of the first women to be ordained as an Orthodox woman rabbi, spoke. And she really brought the house down in terms of a call to arms, that now's the time to act. We're we've got the education behind us, it's time to propel forward. And then she asked everybody in the audience, stand up if you are studying to be, if you're studying to be a rabbi, if you're on one of these, on these rabbinic tracks. And there were 20 or 30 women who stood up. And then there was this thunderous applause and, standing ovation. And there's a passage in the Talmud that really came to mind when I saw this scene. Because it's a passage that talks about, you have the rabbis sort of disagreeing about a particular clay oven and whether or not this clay oven is, pure or impure. And there's one rabbi who sort of holds his ground firmly that it's one way and the other rabbi is the other way. And this rabbi calls on a whole lot of miracles to demonstrate that, he's right. And at the end of the day, the other rabbis say, yes, but you know what? The Torah isn't in heaven. The Torah is on earth with us, and it's we who ultimately are the ones who are empowered to make the decisions about the practical ramifications of the way the law will work. And then the story sort of zooms out, and it goes to saying, and then someone met Eliyahu Hanavi who was walking along the way, and they asked him, what was God doing when the rabbis were arguing? And he said he was sitting up in Shamayim, he was sitting up in heaven laughing and saying, Nitzchuni banai, Nitzchuni, which means, my sons, you have defeated me. That It's like the parent passing on the tradition to the children, who are then independent and able to take their skills and run with it. And I really was reminded of that at that conference, and I thought, what's God doing while all these women are standing up and applauding? And we have someone who said, not in my lifetime there'll be rabbis, and that there are now such educated women. And I thought, God's sitting up there going, nitzchuni bnotai, nitzchuni, like laughing and saying, you know, my girls, my daughters, you have defeated me. And I really think that that's powerful in terms of showing that the law is with us to some degree in terms of shaping, if you have that education to bring that about. And just lastly, I guess the other aspect of this, as I mentioned before, was the domestic violence that I'd studied, and I guess that has been a thread through my life, and I guess also that in terms of sort of pushing the constraints, because in 1998 or whenever it was that I started it, the shift in the attitude generally within the community, and particularly with the rabbis around awareness of domestic violence, has really changed. And I think partly me and Gail are involved in an organisation called the Jewish Alliance Against Family Violence that's really about raising awareness about domestic violence and those issues. And over the years, as we've sort of worked and engaged cooperatively with the rabbis to raise awareness of those issues, you know, it's also changed, I guess, broadly across the community. But that's also been an area, I guess, where there's been a need to push against the constraints. So I guess, you know, the social action, the learning together, I'm constantly walking that tightrope of balancing being an Orthodox committed woman and a feminist.
Thank you, Judy. I think when we hear from Talya, we'll see that we have certain themes which emerge, particularly around women's education, but I'll let Talya tell you more about that herself. Coming from a small community of Perth, Talya was educated at Carmel College, where there was room for differences of opinion, but not wide knowledge of how many opinions were available. Her parents encouraged discussion, but the sense of family that Perth provided did not prepare her for the shock of differences she met when she came east to live. She experienced a whole new set of streams of Jewish behaviors. They were not all very open-minded, and the way differences had been valued at home. Talya decided that she would become a teacher of Jewish studies, as it is through education that minds can be opened. She works at Moriah College, where she sees her central role is to encourage girls to learn at the same level Jewishly as the boys have done for generations. Women have to be part of the conversation at every level within Judaism. Their opinions differ from men on topics they have in common, and most certainly in matters that concern only women. The entrenched tradition has ensured men have determined all acceptable behaviors. Halacha is as dynamic as a tide line that ebbs and flows. Today, it must also be determined with women, both in mind and equally at the discussion table. Talya will talk about how she sees the future of both boys and girls who have this education. Firstly, there has to be the desire of their parents for them to have it. Then the girls and the boys have to want to be shown a new world where their Judaism becomes a way of life that is meaningful to them equally in ways not met before. So I'm really excited to hear from Talya.
Thank you, Hinda. As Hinda said, when I first moved to Sydney, I really found it a bit of a shock. I kind of assumed that the way that I'd been brought up and everything that I had been exposed to was just the way things were. And in Perth, I really didn't feel that there was anything that I couldn't do. My family was prominent in the Perth Jewish community, and I was just used to being able to do whatever I wanted to do Jewishly. I didn't really feel this desire. I wouldn't have described myself even as a feminist because I wasn't even aware that there was something I was aspiring to that I didn't already have. When I moved to Sydney, and I was involved in B'nai Akiva. I had done 2 years already as a madricha in B'nai Akiva in Perth, and then I did my 3rd year in Sydney. And I remember it was Simchat Torah, and we were organising the celebration, and I said, okay, so and we'll have a Torah that the women will be dancing with. And they said, no, we have to check that. I was completely surprised. I did not expect no, and I don't like being told no. I don't like people saying no. So, and then it came back with a no answer. No, we were not allowed to dance with the Torah. And what I also noticed was this scrambling around with, oh, someone's raised this idea of what we should do. Now we have to decide which rabbi should we ask and who's going to give us this opinion. And everyone who are asking, obviously all the rabbis are men, and it was almost like if we ask the right one, maybe we'll get a yes answer, and if we ask the wrong one, then we won't be able to do it. It just seemed a little bit bizarre. From my opinion, when I looked at that situation, I thought, this is women who want to get closer to Torah. We should be jumping for joy. People should be celebrating. There are people who want to do more, whose biggest desire is just to have that closeness. And yet, we're saying no to them. And if there are opinions out there, and we know that there are opinions, halakhic opinions, that it says that that's okay, why would we not straight away say, okay, so let's go for those halakhic opinions to bring people closer? It just didn't even make any sense in my mind. And there were 2 arguments that I kept on encountering with people who were saying no. And these 2 things kept on coming up. The first one was, what's the real motivation behind these women? Why do they want to get closer? What are they really after? It just, I honestly, the first time I heard that, I didn't even know how to respond. Because what is this underlying sinister motive? Like, what are they trying to do? The other argument that I kept on hearing was, you know what? Women are just more spiritual than men. They've just got this inner spirituality, and they don't need that other stuff because they've just got this internal spirituality. So I looked internally, and I thought, am I really inherently spiritual? And honestly, I don't think that I am. I'm not someone who's this spiritual person. I mean, I think it's amazing people who are. I admire those people, but for me, I feel like I'm just someone who is, this is the way it is, I'm text-based, this is, let's just, you know, I'm a doer, like this is what we can do. I'm not, I don't have this great spirituality inside me. So to say that, you know, all women have this spirituality just didn't sit right to me. So those were the 2 arguments that I kept on encountering. And it didn't really seem like enough. I went away and I studied my master's in Israel. And I encountered people from all over who were in my classes. And I started to see that actually there are a lot of other ways that we can do things. And we're quite, you know, behind in a lot of ways here in Australia, and we are quite separate. And I didn't really realise that sometimes we lose track of that being in Australia, just how far away we are, and that there are different ways of doing things, halakhic different ways of doing things. So for me, I keep on coming back to, if there is a way halakhically of giving women this closeness to Torah, if they desire it, then we should be reaching for those ways. We should be teaching. And for me, I mean, as it's already been spoken to, so I don't want to sound like a broken record of what's already been said, but it does all come back to education. This movement of women pushing forward and pushing the boundaries, which started in the 60s, it's not men coming up to women saying, excuse me, would you like a bigger role in this? It's not. It's women who are coming and saying, we want this. You have to give it to us. And this is really this rebellion. unless we become more educated and unless we actually know what to ask for, then no one's going to give it to us. So the only way is to educate and to know the halakhic opinions, and to, instead of scrambling around to think, okay, who am I going to ask, to actually be one of those people who other people can ask. And to say, I know what I'm allowed to do. I know that the Torah also belongs to me. And I'm going to push for this. Because unless we do it, then no one else is going to. At the beginning, when women first started to become educated, and there was this push, there were also parameters set for it. So parameters saying, okay, that's great that women want to become educated, so you can learn Tanakh, go for it, but not Talmud. Because if you learn Talmud and you learn the ways of doing things, then you are someone who can voice an opinion and can be a apostle, can be someone who says what is right and wrong halakhically. And so to be putting parameters saying yes a little bit, but not opening the door altogether, it actually limited women more because they had a little bit but not enough. We now have to realise we want it all, we have to learn it all, and only in that way can we move forward. I think here, for a lot of the community, I think both men and women are limited in what they have access to. We don't have the same resources they have on the Northern Hemisphere, and I think actually there's a lot of opportunity in that. If the boys and the girls at school are both needing this push to learn Talmud, to learn in greater detail, then they can come at that together and learn together. It doesn't have to be about the girls learning from the boys or who can learn more. I think generally if we as a community start to increase our Torah learning for the children here, then hopefully that will change. And I think it's equally important, not just that the girls are doing it by themselves, but I think it's equally important that the boys are seeing women learning. And I think it's equally important that they're saying that they can learn from women. It's not just women learning from men. So hopefully that's a shift. I think at the moment we're sitting at a very, very exciting time. When I sat on this panel, on a similar topic only a few years ago, when I think back to what I said then and talking, like things have already changed. Even in the last few years, we're now seeing this increase in female Orthodox rabbis. We're now seeing this huge change of women being able to determine halacha. And for me, that we're being around at that time and seeing this change is very, very exciting. So all we have to do is see where it's all going to go from here.
Thanks very much. Oh, sorry. Thanks very much. Boy, now I can see that we have hope for the future. It's really it's great to see all of you working in this area and striving to achieve and amazing. And I'm from Melbourne. So I think we will now open it up to any questions. The lady over there. Yes.
Have you got microphones? They're coming.
Yeah, I was going to. That's right. Thanks, Guy. Can each of you please identify yourselves and stand up and which affiliate you come from, please?
I'm Anne Cross and I'm from the North Side Sydney Group, the council. Looking at this question of putting the Talya to begin with, I always like to have a case reference. And when it's in Lawrence, just before they went back, had mentioned this, I went to Rabbi Jeremy Lawrence and asked him where that reference was, and he said it was in the Gemara, and I get that 24 or 27 somewhere. So, and on that basis, I went to my Chabad rabbi. I actually put it in writing to ask, because I wasn't trying to be rebellious or feminist, but I sincerely wanted to know if that was a possibility within Chabad. I never got an answer. So if you don't want to go rabbi shopping, what are your suggestions that women can do to try and make it more open when you're just being given a cold shoulder and shunned out?
Are you addressing this to anyone in particular?
Maybe Talya?
To be honest, I think that to a certain degree we do still have to, if you're starting from scratch, there is that sense of shopping. It doesn't only have to be shopping around male rabbis. I think that there are many women who are learned who can also help with that and explain things and also point you in the right direction. I think that there are many wonderful male rabbis who also can help guide. For me, it's not so much about does it have to be a man or a woman. It's more who's going to give the opinion that sits right. So I think it's about finding you can't kind of avoid that shopping sense, but it is about speaking to enough people to then find who you can connect with, whether that be an educated woman or man who can then point you in the right direction.
Because I want to stay in Orthodoxy, not necessarily go to Reform.
I think it's important to know that in Orthodoxy that it does exist. And I think it's important that within Orthodoxy that there are those people who you can talk to and who can guide you to that.
People like that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Linda Jones. I'm from ICJW, national body rather than Oregon role. One of the things that's wonderful to hear is about your experiences. One of the things that's secrecy can make for a lot of people in the room is to say, well, you've got off a job, you've had this education at a Jewish school. Most people my age, certainly in Australia, didn't have that as an opportunity. I think a lot of people in this room didn't have that as an opportunity. And I want to say to you that there are places where there are opportunities to learn. And we just happen to have one of those opportunities coming up now. So we will, of course, be very perhaps, but Limud Oz Australia, which is the Limud International Movement, is happening in Sydney in 2 weeks' time over the general weekend. And we've got a debate in Melbourne. In Melbourne. The following weekend in Sydney. We have got one of these fantastic women who's got Siva, Orthodox Siva, Gail is coming. In Melbourne, we've got a baby drush so you can actually learn how to over a period of time. First time ever in Australia. So please, keep an eye on, don't see that it's not here. There are places where this is happening, and as Talya said, try to connect with other people who might be able to point you somewhere. And the Orthodox is a very good starting place. Internationally, by the way, there are people in most universities around the world.
I just add that the National Council of Jewish Women in New South Wales branch, right here in this building, has been very supportive of this topic. They had a panel here a few years ago, and from that panel spawned a women's and men's mixed Talmud class taught by my husband, who's all the way in the back. I think this is something that's been near and dear to. I want to commend National Council of Jewish Women for really taking this on as a project to encourage women's Talmud study.
I'm Jenny Guy from Sydney, and I'm involved with the Ward Sydney on Sunday, June the 17th. This Sunday at the library in Double Bay, at the Lara Library, Rabbi Rafa Ested is speaking. So if you get in touch with the Limud office, the Shalom office, you still may be able to get a ticket if you're interested in hearing her. This Sunday morning, 10 o'clock, at the Lara Library in Double Bay. She's amazing.
I was wondering if you could give us an opinion about what seems to be a contradictory trend in Israel. Where women are progressively having their rights today, seems to be heading totally in a different direction. So I'm struggling to reconcile reconcile, women becoming ordained to be rabbis and women being relegated to second-class citizens, and in fact being told that they're mentally inferior in Israel. So.
Can you just give me some specifics in what context you're talking about that?
There are just seen news clips of rabbis in a number of settlements who preach, who talk about the fact that women should not be allowed to be seen praying in public, they should be kept separate, they shouldn't be taught too much because their brains can't deal with it, and they're inferior. I've seen that.
I think that, look, I think I mentioned this, we're at a juncture really in history now of a time of tremendous change. And if you think about it, take sort of a long-term perspective of it, the amount of change that has happened in terms of women's roles and progression in Orthodoxy, since 1956 to now, if you think about it, that's not a long time in history for such a great amount of change to have happened. And I think that when you have any kind of large change, you will have backlash. And I think what you're mentioning there is the backlash. And I would suggest it's probably backlash from particularly conservative segments of the society. And I think that change is not unidirectional. It happens very organically, and often it is 2 steps forward and 2 steps back, because you have to bring, I guess, what's called yamcha. You have to bring the grassroots, you have to bring people along, otherwise that change isn't going to take hold. And I guess what you're describing there is that backlash. So maybe that's the 2 steps back that's happening in certain segments. But I think if you look more broadly across at what's happening, you will see that there is sort of more and more support for, even if you think just generally in terms of feminism and what women can do in Israel compared to many other countries around Israel. Sorry?
That's not a particularly in line comparison.
No, but I think what it shows is that within Israel there is that feminism has taken root, if you like, and I think that the way to combat that backlash is really just with facts on the ground and grassroots support, and to go slowly and quietly about building that support and building up that strength with people who identify with the stories and the narratives that you tell and see a hole or see a gap or feel a hunger or have a need, and you plug that and you build up more support. So that effectively what happens is the backlash, or the people that are talking in that way, have to eventually fine-tune what they are saying, because the tide has come down. And I think in this regard the horse has bolted, and that wave is coming right out.
Hi, I'm Anne Wong from the National Council in Melbourne. From your lips to God's ears, but in relation to the halacha and the progress we see, I'd like to make 2 comments and ask a question. One is that the rabbinate in Israel is very conservative and not, I think, following the direction that maybe say the groundswell or the groundswell is moving in. It's becoming more and more conservative, and that's a problem, I think. For the ladies, I think in relation to the halacha, there are lots of groups now that recognise that women can make aliyah and actually even read in the Torah. I think that what the issue is that you have to have courage, and you have to belong to a community that has courage and it wants to achieve that equality. Not sure that the halacha is there yet, but if you come to Shira in Melbourne, we're there. So I encourage everybody to come and get Aliot and read one. This is during Melbourne. I would like to ask a couple of questions in relation to the rabbis, the ordination of female rabbis, and that's something that I applaud. I'm just wondering whether you think the approach to get refusal will change when we have female rabbis. That's one question. And then the other question is what are your attitudes towards the women in the wall and also the buses in Israel where the women are forced to sit in the back.
Susan's going to speak a bit about categories. So maybe we can either wait to answer that question.
Remember, we are a mixed multitude, and so we are many people, and we have many, many opinions. And some of the people have several opinions. And some people are entrenched with their opinions and like to say no. And some people are open-minded and say there are three opinions. Let us take an opinion that fits this situation or this environment. And so you picked up on some interesting things about Israel. Yes, Israel is very, very reactionary in many areas. But you know, it's in Israel that the Tanakh, that the rabbinical advisors to the Levitan began, not in America, which is our new Babylon, it was in Israel that they began. So within the system in Israel, things are definitely changing. I have been to services, a Yom Kippur service in Israel, an Orthodox Yom Kippur service, which was men and women separated by a machitza. We sat separately, but the women davened on one side and the men davened on the other, and they came together for the reading, with the machitza down the middle of the reading, here. The women read one section, and then one parasha, the men read the next parasha. So it happens, it is happening, and what Judy says, look, we are in the middle of a revolution. We still are in revolutionary times, and the more we do it, the more it happens. When God sees that we are doing it, and we are doing it with a full heart, and with the intention not to be disobedient children, but to find our own way, it will happen. What's important in all this is that those of us who have sons and grandsons educate them into knowing that this is okay and to accepting what the women in their families want and having them help us find a way.
National Council of Jewish Women Australia, President. Look, this is really a personal question, and I'd like to congratulate you all on the work that you do. I think it's fantastic to see Orthodox women pushing against constraints, as is the topic today. What I can't understand, we have been talking about education, and we all know that education is really, really important. But why do we stress so much about the education of women before they can take part in some of these rituals? There are many men who have had no education, very little Jewish education, and they can be called up at any time. And I find this very upsetting. I find it very wonderful that you said, I don't know whether that was Rabbi Danko, even. No, okay. I find it incredible that in 1956, Gail, you were called up to the Bina or whatever. One of the
things that I find very sad is that I have the same education as many Jewish men I know, and I'm an only child. I have two parents who are no longer with me, and it would give me, and I know them, the greatest joy if I was to be called up. It actually makes me very, very sad even now to say Kaddish. What I've done in the last few years is that I have received invitations from the conservative shul, and I've accepted that. And I was in tears actually when I was able to be called to the Torah to say something for either my mother or my father at the time. If this has happened, if this is something that is allowable, and if it is written in the Gemara or wherever it is written, why aren't we promoting that? Why is it that I have to sort of find this out? Am I allowed to do this? Am I not allowed to do that? And I think this is something that I applaud you, that I wish that could be, that you could promote, and that it shouldn't be something that I have to find out. It should be something that I am offered. I'm offered like a man who has the same education, or same Hebrew education and background as I have. It doesn't matter that I might not go to shul every week, because I certainly don't. But, okay, so that's my question. Could you please, why isn't something being done?
Well, I guess I just would like to take your example, because I think when I speak to rabbis about why we need to move in the way we do, it's exactly because of that. Because, and that comes from the Orthodox. Yeah, women, and I mean the experience that I've had also with teaching about this stuff is that women, Orthodox women, want to find ways to participate and to express themselves. And if, as Talya said, the halakha allows it, if the framework allows it, then we really need to allow that or facilitate that to happen, or else what's going to happen is that people will leave Orthodoxy. And I can just say, I know like in my synagogue, and I'm sure probably the great synagogue, there are definitely synagogues around Sydney where women say Kaddish regularly every Shabbat, where the other women and men will stand with them and support them to say Kaddish. It's not, so there are definitely places where that is happening. I take your point that maybe it needs to be promoted more widely, and that's something you guys is not the rabbis can do with it. I guess we can do it through the Tefillah network to let people know.
Can I add, just quickly, just on that topic of Kaddish, I had a remarkable conversation just a week ago with my niece who's a Year 9 student, and she said, we was talking about Kaddish and how there's, at the shul that I go to, the Orthodox shul I go to, that there's a woman saying Kaddish, and there have been others in the past, and she said, what? Women not always say Kaddish? And I think that that's amazing, that a young girl now, that is becoming her normal. So for us it's a big step, but gradually and hopefully now it's just almost there, that is the new normal, that women can just do those things.
Anyone still ask your question?
Yes, thanks, Jane Khan. I'm just again trying to de-spaghetti some of the things that have come up, and I guess what's happened, some of the things that really struck me was Gail's comment on ignorance and conservatism of our communities, or how we can potentially be ignorant and conservative, which stops us from challenging the norms, if you like. And then also what that lady earlier said about the big W, us being women, but in a wider context than just the Jewish community. And I guess what I'm thinking is, just as you have demonstrated and role modeled your capacity and ability to be mindful and respectful of the norms of Judaism, and yet challenge them to the extent that women can hold their power and participate. I'm wondering, in your experience, Talya, for example, in the schools and in yours, Gail, and also yours, as well as Judith, and for us as Jewish women. How do we exemplify that for our children, where we're operating as Jewish women, but working in the broader society of the secular world, where we are not constrained by our conservatism of how we've been raised with regard to Judaism or our views on Israel perhaps, but rather be encouraged to be in dialogue with other people, so we can in fact distill our information to them, but also learn from them, so that we can explore how all of these worlds can intersect and intersect optimally.
Oh, that's a beauty. This is something I don't like saying, but it's in fact the truth. I experienced, again, from what I've seen in the United States, the women who have money put it in the right place. I will not subscribe to you, XYZ charity, unless you have women on your board, and I have $1 million for the building that you want to put up. Now, is this blackmail or double email? It is a very powerful tool, and there are women who have money and who are generous with their money. So that's one, perhaps, throwaway. But it's an example for our children and grandchildren. Don't just give the money to the place because they knock on your door. Find out who their boards of management are. And if they haven't got women there, I will give to you even my $10 when you get women on board. So that's one simple answer. There's another simple answer at home, and Judaism is a lot at home. When the women know how to make a motzi, and then how to make kiddush, and then how to daven shacharis, and so when we, as the women in the house, demonstrate to our daughters that we are empowered to do those things that we can do, and you don't have to do it, darling, but just know that we do it here, in our house, we do it. That also gives a girl a model. And for both the girls and the boys, as I said originally, women instinctively educate their children with love from birth, boys and girls. And so our values come through in mother's milk. Other than that, we are continually fighting that in our homes, in our lounge rooms, in our bedrooms, and that outside influence, which is mostly evil, is hard to combat. And then we come to school, and then we come to university, and so all the time, but it's really no different from the way it's ever been. We've always had outside pressures telling us it's okay. Look, it hasn't got hand in it. You know, you can just have a bite of this, it's so delicious. You know, this little edging in, edging in, edging in. It's a battle all the time. But this is what it is to be Jewish. We're different, and we remain different, and we are aware of our difference, and it's a kodesh, it's a holy difference, and if we value it, then it's not good.
So I had a story that really stuck with me. When I was 18, I studied in Israel, and I visited Cave of Rachel, where Rachel is buried, and I noticed, I was with a group, a tour, and I noticed that the site, the religious site, seemed to be in control by the ultra-Orthodox, which put restrictions on who could go in, where you could stand, and I was very upset. And I commented to my Madrikali counselor, and I said, so why do they control it? And she sort of said it something like, well, they come and they clean it and they take care of it and they look after it, so they become in control of the site. And it really stuck with me that there's something about, I don't know if there might be other politics going on because it's Israel, but I will say that it did stick with me that the people who are the custodians, who take care of it, who do the dirty work, who look after it, sometimes end up in control. And I think what I heard in Gail's comment is that sometimes our institutions in this community may become very conservative, or the status quo is conservative because maybe those are the custodians, and we as women have to, put the work in, even if it's easier not to be the custodians, rather than just let the conservative element dictate things, because it might be easier to let the conservative element dictate things, but we do have to take ownership and put the hard work.
Can I also just add, I think the other thing is, in terms of changing, in terms of the halakhic process and where you sort of sit within that, I think it's important that you ask the questions and that you keep asking the questions of your rabbi, because what that demonstrates is that there's a need, there's a desire, and the question then that the rabbi is faced with is not, well, this is something new, this has never happened in my community. He's forced to deal with the fact that there are women who are raising these issues, who are raising these questions, who have this desire, this need, and the more women that ask and that push, the more the question is framed differently, and you're sort of guiding the direction of where the answer will come. And then if you find a solution, like a halakhic solution that's acceptable, and you can take that on, and you are active, and you turn up, and you engage, I think that also demonstrates to your children that it's something that you're actively involved in. You're not just passively watching it from the side, and you're also actively then engaged in the dialogue that's going to frame the way the halakha is going to be brought out.
I think we have time for one more question if anyone wants one, or... Okay. So, it's really interesting because this morning we were talking about leaning in, and Sharon was talking about the W in the ICJW, or this afternoon. Sorry? Sorry? Okay. I'm going to indulge your... I'm really sorry, but this afternoon we had the J. The JW. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. So, and it's kind of all coming together. Okay. So what I wanted to say is that, if you look at ICJW, and all of you know about my passion about supporting I would not, and the whole get issue, which we haven't discussed, but also because I knew that I would say a couple of words about it. Our call for action at ICJW, and what we've really been focused on for as long as I can remember, decades, is in supporting Agunot and finding ways and means of systematic halakhic solutions to the problem, apart from also looking at the civil society and how that can help the women that we're supporting. I suppose what I'm going to ask you something very practical now, and I'm going to indulge you for 1 minute. Anyone who has in your community a prenup that has been approved by your rabbi, could you please stand up now, and someone is going to come and get your email right now. Stand up first. Stand up, please. And can you go around and while we're doing this? Yeah. Just because we need to know.
In their marriage. No, not in their marriage.
And work on it as well as part of our future program. And we have it all in the room. Thank you. And in one moment I'm going to ask you to say thank you.
So, first of all, I want to know the land of Israel, and I say a few words about it. I'd like to thank you for the amazing panelists. This is Hinda Judith, Gail, and Talya Wiseman for your important remarks and impressive presentation. You are so young, you are so vital, and I'm sure you are our promised future. As the sociologist Dr. Anne Morris mentioned this morning, that only 150 years ago women began to struggle for their rights, and the journey to gender equality began. Since then, we have many achievements thanks to the struggle of women's organizations throughout the world, and the journey is still going on. But I'm going to spoil the party. Because I want to mention the Orthodox society. And in the Orthodox society, women just began the journey. Not your way. What happened in Israel, you mentioned the Orthodox society still believe that Kodah Shel Bat Melech Pnima, the honor of king's daughter, is still inside. The number of in Israel, where I live, the Orthodox parties have much power. And as I said in the morning, if we want to make a change, we women must be in influence and power position. The number of Orthodox women who are in public decision-making position in Israel is, zero. Zero. There is not a single elected ultra-Orthodox woman at the community, municipal, or national level. This situation is a stain on a democracy which creates continued damage to the status of women in general. But in the recent years, we can see a changing process. More women want to give their voice, to realize their potential, and to be involved in social and community social processes and to change the current situation. On a personal level, I meet some of them in the various programs that we have initiated in order to help advance their status, and I'm impressed by their abilities, their desire, and their determination. As long as women in Orthodox society do not have equal rights and opportunities in Israel we don't have, it will be a community that is left behind, a community in which equality and social justice do not exist. I believe that we, the ICJW, which deals with the W, should come out of this conference with announcements and encouragements to promote women in ultra-Orthodox society also, because you did the way. Many of religious women still there. And finally, I would like to thank again for thank the chance to thank again for the wonderful organization of the conventions in general, and for each and every one of you for the fascinating panel in particular. On behalf of the ICJW, I'd like to give you a small present.